Action. Boy, it feels like the movie just started, or the filming, or the taping, or the recording, because there's action. Emily and I are big fans of action when it comes to brand storytelling. A lot of people focus heavy on characters, and that's good. But if you ignore the action, you're ignoring the story. Think about it. Think about what people do when they run across a street performer. Let's say 5 street performers are setting up and they're getting their instruments out and their cardboard box they're going to dance on. And then they start to perform. What do people on the street do, Em?
They gather around.
Yeah, right? They want a good seat. They want to see what's going to happen. They want to be close to that hat so they can drop dollars in it maybe. You don't know. They just want to be there. And what about an unfortunate situation like a fight at a middle school? You know what happens. All of the students around run up and try to break up the fight and conflict resolve whatever the problem is, right? They get together as a group and say, how can we work through this in a friendly way?
That would be an ideal scenario. Maybe add running to go get a responsible adult.
Yeah, that would be another good one. But we're not talking about European schools, are we? No, we're talking about what we have all experienced, folks. We've all been to schools and we've seen what happens. People from what seems like miles around sprint over so they can gather around the action. Is it good action? No, it's sad. Is it drawing a crowd? Yeah. So think about that. And what about even a building being demolished? We're going to bring down a 12-story skyscraper in the middle of the building, and what happens?
People want to watch it.
You attract a crowd. Actions, tattoo it on your arm somewhere, folks. Actions attract an audience. Now, there are so many very, very good examples of real actions. Not fake actions, not fictional, not made up, but actual real actions that a brand can take, that a brand can engage in, that's going to attract a lot of attention, a lot of audience. And this guy right here?
Blake McCoskey.
I'm always afraid to say McCoskey unless you've said it once.
I know. That's why I know you paused so that I could jump in there. So you might recognize this good-looking face as the owner and founder of Tom's Shoes. So for those of you who are not familiar, Tom's is a for-profit company whose business model is a one-for-one. And so simply put, that means for every pair of shoes that they sell, they give a pair to a child in need.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. So the company founder, Blake McCoskey, shown here, is also known as the Chief Shoe Giver. That's his alternate title. So here with Tom's, their story isn't just in their shoes. It's in the social movement that they've been known for through real actions of their company.
That's incredible. If we had a moment, we would maybe try to contrast that with how Nike handles themselves and their business model. But just take a look at what Tom's does. That's amazing. One for one. You buy a pair of Tom's, they give a pair of Tom's. That is an action that brand has been taking since they were formed.
And actually, I've seen a lot of billboards and advertisements here, just within the last season that show, one of their newer shoe lines, and underneath it says, "This is not a shoe, it's a movement."
Yeah. It's not a shoe, it's a movement. That's how you get people to jump on board. That's a story that when you hear it, you can't look away. Show me Blake putting shoes on somebody else. Show me Blake at a factory gathering up shoes to get on a plane and go somewhere with. That's a story I can't look away from. There's other stories you can't look away from too, and maybe they're not so magnanimous. Maybe they're not meant to help save the world. Maybe they're just meant to reinforce what the brand wants people to think about them. And the example we have here is the Red Bull Stratos. There was an Austrian, that's him right there in his spacesuit, that Austrian, Felix Baumgartner. Felix went up in a helium-filled balloon and a space capsule, essentially, all the way up to the stratosphere. And you can see Red Bull all over his helmet and his arm, and this was branded as the Red Bull Stratos jump. And everybody was paying attention. It was all over social media. This story, this set of actions had attracted such a large audience. And to be honest, I'm sure some of them were watching for the potential tragedy. And some of them were watching for the look how far mankind has come. And others were watching because they know that Red Bull associates itself with really exciting, cutting-edge actions. And so they tuned in. And what happened? Well, he made it. He landed. It was 10 minutes of falling from the stratosphere. I'm not sure, and well, I'm not going to talk about how gross the inside of my helmet would probably be, but how in the world I'm impressed by this, not only because Felix managed to do this, but also because Red Bull found something that truly epitomizes their brand. Does Red Bull give you wings? Apparently. Apparently all the way to the stratosphere. What an incredibly accurate and good real action for that brand to take. And just like Tom's, what a very appropriate action for that brand to take. Every brand is different, so the actions they take are going to have to be different. Oh, this is a sad slide. These people made some mistakes. Some real actions taken by a brand can have terrible repercussions for the brand's story. So some actions reinforce the brand and make it look good. Other actions are just damaging. And this is one of those damaging examples. Poor Volkswagen. They had worked for decades to build the brand that they are. They worked for so long and for so hard to be able to be who they were. And in one horrible week, with the release of one report that revealed that they weren't being as honest as they could be, okay, they lied a lot, tarnished what was a beautiful brand identity. They had really built up something beautiful. And now the question is, how do they overcome that? How do they bounce back from that? It's a very dangerous game to play. One answer is going to lead you to more ridicule and a closed down business eventually. And another solution is going to rebuild the tattered brand. Do you know what the right answer is, Emily? I'm at a loss.
I don't think there is really a right answer with that one.
Basically, just kind of be careful. Don't let yourself get in that kind of a situation, or don't, as a media strategist and brand storytelling expert, don't put yourself in a situation to tell a story that you aren't comfortable telling. For example, the BP...
Deep Horizon.
Yeah, the Deep Horizon fire and subsequent...
Oil spill.
Oil
Disaster.
spill is a... Look, I don't want to get too deep into this, at least not nearly as deep as their pipes were when they all broke. I will say that BP does its own job of trying to spread its own story. A brand is in charge of its story, and they can put out there all that they want to put out there about how good they think they are and how helpful and how proactive they think they are. And they may even try to rebrand themselves or change the story. But it's not easy, and it's not even really something that's going to work on a regular basis. Think about some other brands, Kanye West and Comcast. These two entities, Kanye and Comcast, they create so many other stories, so many negative stories, that people don't even bother repeating their good stories. It doesn't matter how good Kanye makes himself look by opening up a school somewhere. It doesn't matter what Comcast does when they finally unlock the data cap on everybody. The damage is already done. So it's a good thing to keep in mind, future media strategists and brand storytelling experts. Don't think that you can change your client. Don't think that you can change them. You can't change their business model. You can't change their way that they handle things. You can't change their level of honesty. All you can change is how people think about them based on the stories that you help tell about them. And you've got to decide whose stories you want to tell. This day and age, it's no easy thing to hide from the public. If a company, a brand, an individual makes a big mistake, you can't go hide somewhere and hope it blows away. Because while you're hoping for it to blow away, millions of people are talking about it on different social media platforms. Now, social media, as we've said, has given a voice to the people. We've got a much more democratic way of communicating, at least, thanks to social media. Our voice used to be confined to a letter. Let's say I get really mad at a store because of something that went wrong, and I write them a very angry letter about all the problems and who the manager was that spoke to me in a bad way and who the customer relations employee was that didn't help me at all. And I would send that off, and I would sit there and wait for some form of resolution. Well, the mail takes a long time, so that kind of resolution may take a while, even if they're planning on doing it. But generally, where does that letter end up, Emily?
On somebody's desk?
Yep, on somebody's desk that's shaped surprisingly like a round garbage can. And it just sits there. And nobody cares because nobody heard you yell into the dark, and so nobody felt obligated to answer you. But that day is over. We don't write letters in anger, do we?
Nope, we take to Twitter.
Look out! I'm on my Twitters.
Put you on blast.
Emily and I had an opportunity to do that, in fact.
We did.
A couple of years ago.
Yep.
San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco.
What?
So, yeah, man, we've told this story a time or two. And I like it every time because it ends with a happy ending.
Right.
So a couple of years ago, Jason and I, we were stranded in San Francisco. After an on-ground emergency caused an overwhelming amount of flight cancellations and delays. And so we were on the phone with United. All of us were trying to call and get the information about would we be able to leave on our flight. And our wait times were upwards of 2 hours and some change. So one of the people in our party decided to take the inquiry or the quest for information to Twitter and tweeted United with the questions that we had. And so instead of 2 hours and change, we had an answer from United in 20 minutes. And so, again, we've told this story so many times since this day, and it always ends with United showing up in a favorable light.
Right.
And it ends always with us feeling like we received great customer service that day.
And we talk about this too. Contrast our feelings if they hadn't responded on Twitter. My story, Emily's story, every time we talked about it would be, you wouldn't believe United. The one time we needed them, we were left on phone hold for 2 hours and then disconnected, and we ended up having to take a Greyhound for 3 weeks all the way back to Florida. That's a little extreme. I'm glad that didn't happen, but that's exactly what could have happened without getting some social media intervention. And that's exactly why these brands, these large brands out there, are using social media listeners to make sure that their story is safe. Any customers that are broadcasting a story contrary to what they want the people to hear about them, they jump in and they try to fix it.
And I'll actually share another experience that happened recently. I was wanting to set up internet service at my home. And, we have a couple of choices here in Central Florida, one of them being a company called Bright House and the other one being AT&T and Uverse. And so after some research and figuring out which would be the best option for my case, I went with AT&T because I had heard some not so great brand stories from other Bright House customers. And so when I was not getting the information or attention that I needed from AT&T on my particular installation, I took to Twitter and I asked AT&T to provide me some help with this issue. And I said, please don't make me turn to Bright House. And not only did AT&T respond on Twitter, but so did Bright House. And all Bright House did was say, we saw that you mentioned us on Twitter. How can we help you?
Yep. Yep, it's not just about putting out fires, it's about stealing customers. It's about being there
Well, it's about
when the brand
listening.
isn't.
Yeah, about listening for an opportunity to step in and give a positive experience to your customers.
Now, again, just before we leave this topic of social media listening for your brand, imagine if AT&T hadn't been listening. The only response that Emily would have had would have been, well, how
Crickets.
can we help you? Bright House is here to help.
Yeah.
AT&T's not, but when can we schedule you up? And by the way, can we talk you into bundles? Sorry, I'm about to just have a little rant about bundles. So let's stop talking about Bright House and move on to fictional actions. Because up until now, we've been talking about the actions that attract an audience that are generally real. Real things that brands can do to attract an audience. There's also a whole category of fictional actions. These fictional actions can have just as big of an impact on what people think about your brand. These elements of brand story not only engage an audience, but they also change what the audience thinks and feels. It's like magic. Now, this guy in the middle, I don't know if you recognize him with all the soot, but that's Mayhem. Mayhem comes to us from Allstate. Yeah, Allstate. And Mayhem is a personification of chaos. Mayhem represents all of the things that can go wrong when you're driving. What does Allstate insure against? Mayhem. So Allstate shows us using fictional actions, actions that make us want to look, they show us what we are protected against. These elicit feelings of empathy and sympathy. One of the commercials that Mayhem is involved in has him playing the part of a grill in the back of a hatchback that somebody forgot to put the fire out in after tailgating. So the hatchback drives away, the fire is stoked and turns into a roaring blaze that catches the car on fire, all thanks to Mayhem. Accidents happen is what they say there. They're basically saying, accidents happen, I'm Mayhem, and how do you deal with it? Allstate. But it's the actions that Mayhem take that attract the audience. Every time one of these Allstate commercials come on, people are less likely to run to the refrigerator. They are less likely to run to the bathroom. They're more likely to sit there, hopping from one leg to the other, waiting for this commercial to be over, because they know if Mayhem is involved, there's going to be some crazy action that's worth watching. And now we'll contrast that with Jack Box. You see him there?
I do.
Jack Box. Jack Box is the fictional CEO of Jack in a Box. Jack Box was reintroduced to the American public in about 1994. Without getting into the gruesome details that you could Google for yourself, Jack in a Box had a horrible, tragic series of events that took place in around 93, early 94 maybe. And they had to overcome these horrible, gut-wrenching mistakes that they made and try to reassure the people that they were still a restaurant that you could go to. And so they did this by not only reintroducing this character, Jack Box, but also sending him on an adventure, an action that he had to go and carry out. What you see in this picture is Jack having arrived at the Jack in a Box board of directors, and he blows it up. He attaches a detonator, pulls up the little lever, and pushes the button. Paper and wood and smoke go flying everywhere, and it symbolizes the board of directors was just blown up by this crazy Jack Box character. Thankfully, after all the tragedy that's occurred, we now have a big round-headed puppet to take care of us. That's basically the message they're putting out there. But if you think about it, what they're really doing is symbolically saying, we recognize we made some mistakes. They're symbolically saying, we are blowing up the things that caused those mistakes. And they're symbolically saying, we're not going to do it again. Does that mean those are true statements? No, we're talking about the stories that brands tell about themselves. It's probably the same people in the boardroom. They're probably sitting in there now. They didn't, I mean, I don't want to break any hearts here and give away any secrets, but they probably didn't blow up a boardroom full of real board members. So what they did is they represented a change using a fictional action, which I don't think would work for BP at all in this situation we were talking about earlier. They probably shouldn't try that. Probably want to stick to heartfelt apologies. Anyway, okay. We'll come back to Jackbox. We'll even talk to you again a little bit later, Mayhem. For now, let's jump into our second exercise for the workshop. Now remember, folks, don't feel stressed out. You're not doing these exercises now. You're going to do them later on, tonight, tomorrow, the weekend, when you feel up to it. And what you're going to do for this one is you're going to figure out ways to apply action to your scenario. You've determined what your brand scenario is. You've got a hypothetical client or a real one. And you're going to figure out ways to put action into those characters. For this, we're going to use a couple of timeline creation tools. If you haven't used these before, they're great for yourself. They're great for students. They're great for project managers. Just go and check out a couple of the tools we recommend. You'll find the links on the Facebook group, like dippity.com, and Easily, again, was another recommended for making timelines. You guys are going to create a 6 to 12 month timeline mapping out the actions that your brand should take to try and attract the kind of attention that you want to attract.